Let's make sure our live audience has it's free. Yeah, if you haven't already, just make sure you signed up for our Poll Everywhere poll. Text Mike Baker 440 to the number 22333. And then you're good. Just set your phone to the side. Good to go. That work okay with the? I don't know either. I do not know.
She thought I was presenting to 700 people.
Let's see what the count is. 4:30.
Did you have much longer hair before?
I did, yeah, a lot longer.
Well, I didn't even realize you were the same.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you told me.
Right.
I was like,
I needed to take that. When you said that today about your, I was like, I got 1%.
That was funny. I tell you, everybody in my family was so happy.
I mean, for him to, think, oh, grandma's not going to.
He was worried. Yeah. We're still alive. I understand why.
Okay. Please know that every movement is caught by the camera. Please know that sounds are caught by the sound equipment. So yes, right there. So, but what we want you to do, just participate as if you were in your school. So like when Micah or Alex tell you to turn and talk, turn and talk. Yeah. So thank you all for coming. I hope you had a great morning. But we're just really proud to have Westwood with us today. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, so time yet? I'm sure this is. Yummy win. Good afternoon. We are so happy to have all of you here today. I hope that everyone enjoyed the morning, either at the virtual conference or at district-wide PLCs for our specials and all kinds of things going on today. That was our first virtual WOW conference. So we've learned a lot this morning. I hope you did, and we'll do this again at some point in time. This afternoon, we have a very special presentation. 2 of our school psychology specialists have agreed to present to us today on Tier 2 behaviors. I know that's one of the things I hear from teachers is that we're struggling, and it seems like every year we have more and more kids with more and more difficult mental behaviors, mental issues going on. So what we wanted to do was start working toward that, and how can we support our teachers. So I am very happy to present to you, and I'm going to ask them to come up here and at least smile and wave at you. Micah Baker, this is Micah, and Alex Fitzgerald. Hello. All right, take it away, guys.
All right. All right, I'm gonna grab that. All right, guys, thank you for coming. My name is Micah Baker. I'm a school psychology specialist here at Springdale. It's my first year here at Springdale. It's my 5th year as a school psychology specialist. Prior to Springdale, I was in Rogers School District and then in Russellville School District. Prior to coming to a school setting, I worked in a variety of different mental health settings, both inpatient and outpatient. Worked on teams to identify interventions and work with different behaviors. Was also part of crisis prevention programs, so dealing with more aggressive type behaviors, self-interest type behaviors. Here in Springdale, I'm an instructor in professional crisis management, and that's a system that we use to deal with some of those high magnitude behaviors. I'm happy to be here with you today. We hope to give you a good overview of behavior and leave you here with, have you leave here with some really good resources. Please make sure you're sitting in your grade level teams in groups of 5. So please, that's important. And if you haven't done so already, please take out your cell phone, your personal cell phone, and if you'll text Micah Baker 440 to the phone number 223333. Okay, and that'll sign you up for a poll that we're going to take here shortly. Once you've signed up for it, it'll give you a message just confirming that, and then you can set your cell phones to the side. Also, please make sure you are logged into Google Classroom. That is the class code that we have on the slide there. So make sure you're signed up. Your administrators should have sent out that link yesterday over the weekend. So just make sure you have those 2 things going. And I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Okay. If you like that or not.
Yeah, I don't need the microphone, but there you go. Hi, I'm Alex Fitzgerald. I am a special education TOSA, so teacher on special assignment. I'm not a school psychology specialist, so sorry about that. You just get a teacher today. This is my 2nd year as a special education TOSA and on our behavior team here at Springdale. Previous to that, I worked in a self-contained classroom, so I worked with students pretty frequently that had lots of Tier 2, Tier 3 behaviors. And before working in Springdale, I worked in Fayetteville in a resource and inclusion classroom. So real quick, those of you who have any buddies that are running late and they don't have the class code, you might jot that down for them because I'm going to switch the slide. But be nice to your friends that came in. Okay, 4 questions today. This is going to kind of be our procedure. So you guys in this room with me, Westwood, on your table are Post-it notes. So if you have questions as we go, please write those down. What we're going to do is collect all those Post-it notes at the end, and then we're going to put a Google Doc on the classroom after this PD where y'all can look at all those questions and answers. For our virtual audience, so all you guys out there in virtual land, if you would please share your questions with your proctor at your building, so that's either your AP or a school psychology specialist or another person from special ed that's at your building, the proctor. If you'll share the question with them, they're going to input it into the chat box that's online. And then we're going to kind of follow the same procedure. If we're getting a lot of the same questions, we'll go ahead and answer those. But for the most part, we're going to go and put all those questions on a doc and answers. And that way just everybody can have access to that same information. We're all on the same page. So our plan for today, as Dr. Morledge kind of already alluded to, but our mission is by the end of the day that you guys, each school, would have the tools that you need to start developing a plan for Tier 2 interventions for behaviors. So, you know, in the district, we've been working a lot on what RTI looks like for academics and how we support kids at different levels who have different kinds of deficits. And so now we're going to start to look at what that might look like for kids that have behavioral deficits. And the plan by the end of the day is that everybody will be able to take away a menu of strategies for that kid, that one specific kid in your classroom that you're really struggling with for behavior. So if you look at our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the RTI triangle and how that relates to behavior intervention. We're going to be looking at defining behaviors as well as picking that one kid. We're going to develop a plan for that kid. So we'll be looking at function and then antecedent and consequence strategies. And then we'll wrap up our time today talking about, as schools, what some of the next steps you guys will need to take as y'all start as buildings to plan how to address tier intervention for behavior. So here's our lovely RTI at work pyramid that I think a lot of us have seen at this point because we've been talking about it a lot, and especially with academics and what that looks like when kids receive services at a broad level and then our interventions for kids. So today our focus is really going to be at that Tier 2 level and for behavior. So I know that there's an elementary committee that's looking at what our Tier 1 kind of program might be for kids, and lots of buildings already have some stuff going on using, I know conscious discipline has been a pretty common one that's been used, but really our focus today is going to be what that next level is. So our primary supports for kiddo, is it working? What do we do next? So if we look at tiers for behavior support, you're going to see that they look just like tiered support for academic skills deficits. So at the Tier 1 level, this is your school-wide support, the primary thing where all students are getting it. You kind of have a building or a grade level plan, and everybody's kind of getting an equal access to skills being taught. Okay? At the Tier 2 level, again, that's what our focus is going to be today. That is going to be your more targeted support. Kids got a skill deficit. We know that we need to work on reducing that problem behavior and then really teaching them a new skill. This is also going to look like maybe starting to develop behavior teams at your building. So if you're struggling in your class, you've got a team of people that have got some knowledge about behavior that can support. And it's really going to look at unique interventions. I know all of you teachers have really great behavior stuff going on for your whole classroom, so this would be what things you need to do uniquely for that student. And then Tier 3, of course, is going to be, okay, we tried Tier 1, we tried Tier 2. This kiddo is still really struggling with behavior, so we're going to have very specific interventions that's typically going to be led by an intervention team. It might also look at a setting change to address the behavior. And it's going to be very specialized, very data-driven, how we're addressing those problems. So that's kind of what the tiered system looks like for behavior. And I'm going to turn it over to Micah to let him talk to you a little bit about defining behaviors.
All right, so we talked about tiers of behavior support. Now let's talk for a little bit about the actual behaviors that we see at each tier. Before we do that, I just want you to individually think of a behavior that you're currently seeing in your classroom, okay? An inappropriate behavior. Maybe something that you're struggling with, you see on a consistent basis. This shouldn't be that hard to do, right? Okay, so go ahead and think of one just individually and just hold on to that We're going to revisit that, and then I'm going to have you discuss with your group shortly about that behavior. Okay, before we get to that, we are going to go ahead and take our poll. Okay, so if you haven't already, I could see many more people have signed up now. Just make sure you text. The text is Micah Baker 440 to the phone number 22333. Okay, so we'll give you just a second to do that. So we're taking this poll to kind of see where we're at right now. Okay, I want you to take this individually. Everyone has their own cell phone. So take this on your own, and then you can maybe talk about it afterwards. But I want you to answer it based on what you think, what you know right now in terms of tiers of behavior. Okay, we want to see where everyone's at. So we should have several hundred participants. And let's go ahead and we're going to pull that poll up now. What we're going to be looking at is some scenarios, okay, some behaviors. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you rate whether you think the behavior that we look at is tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, okay? So once we pull the behavior up, if you'll just text A for tier 1, B for tier 2, C for tier 3, okay? And we'll go ahead and full screen that right there. Okay, so a student screams at the teacher and refuses to do their work. Is this A, tier 1, B, tier 2, or C, tier 3? Don't consult with your neighbor. Just go ahead and put that in. All answers are anonymous. And we're going to give that just a minute. We have several hundred folks dialing that in right now. And the poll's going to adjust accordingly. So we'll give that just a minute. Looks like we have a foot race here for tier 1 and tier 2. Oh, tier 3. It's catching up. So after you've answered, it's okay to maybe kind of turn and discuss with your group. We'll be going quickly to the next question, so. Yeah. All right, I think it's pretty close, so we're going to go ahead and go to our next behavior scenario. Okay, so just hold tight as we change those, because if you dial it in when we change, it'll go to the next question. A student starts to repeatedly bang their head on the wall hard enough to cause injury to the student. Is this A, tier 1, B, tier 2, or C, tier 3? I don't think it matters, lowercase, uppercase. Just punch that in one time, hit send, and then you're good to go. All right. Might give that just a second. I think we're adjusting now. We had some carryover from the first question. Okay, we're going to come back and revisit these behaviors as well, and kind of talk about after we do some lecture what is maybe the more correct tier we should have been looking at. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's adjusted pretty well now. If you'll go ahead and cease responding so we can change to the next question, just hold tight. Okay, question number 3. A student punches another student, runs out of the classroom, and stands by the door. They appear to be very angry. Is this A, tier 1, B, tier 2, C, tier 3? Give you about 10 seconds. Okay, looks like our live audience is good. It's still moving just a little bit. If you'll go ahead and stop on that question, we'll go ahead and move on to question number 4. Okay, question number 4. A student is rolling on the floor and spitting on the carpet. Is this A, tier 1, B, tier 2, C, tier 3? Okay, we'll give about 10 more seconds to let the poll adjust. Okay. All right, one more question. So number 5, a student curses at a peer and spits on the peer and then threatens to kick them in the face. Is this A, tier 1, B, tier 2, C, tier 3? Okay, about 10 more seconds. We'll let the poll adjust there. So what are we noticing from all the polls? We're having responses in all 3 categories. We're seeing some trends, but we're seeing as a district, as everyone out there responding right now, we have different opinions on where behaviors fall. Okay, so we'll come back to that poll. We want to do a little teaching, and then we'll come back and kind of review those questions and see what tier maybe we should all kind of come to agreement on. Okay, so why identify behavior in terms of tiers? Well, that poll just kind of answered that question, right? Depending on who you're talking to, depending on the teacher, the grade level, the building, you might get different responses for the same behavior in terms of how intense it is, how big the need is for that behavior. So what we want to do is standardize this process. If we can do that, we can more effectively intervene, right? We do this in academics. We give grades, we give standardized test scores, we give categories, proficient, meeting expectations. We need to do the same thing with behavior to kind of be on the same page and bring something that can be subjective to be more objective. We want us all to be speaking a common language, okay? So we want to be able to talk to these tiers. So if you're talking to an administrator, someone else, you can quickly say, listen, I'm having tier 3 behavior in my classroom, and that person should know what needs to happen next, the follow-up for that. Our level of intervention needs to match our tier level of behavior, so that's important. And this is a model it's not a gen ed model, it's not a special education model. It's something that we can all kind of speak this common language when we see behavior. If we're walking down the hallway and we see a behavior happening, we should all be kind of on the same page. Special ed, gen ed, it doesn't matter, okay? We should have these concretely into categories. All right, so let's just talk about what are tier 1 behaviors. So tier 1 behaviors are our least severe behavior, okay? Something we're gonna see the most of. Potentially, any student in your classroom could demonstrate these behaviors. So we kind of give the reference 80% or more of students might show these behaviors. So even your best behaved student could show this behavior on any given day. Or you might have a student that more consistently shows this behavior on a daily basis. They're having more consistent behavioral struggles, okay? We would say for tier 1 behaviors, we'd hope that these behaviors could be addressed within the classroom with minimal support, okay? Addressed by the classroom teacher using good teaching strategies, redirections, correctives. We might have to pull the student to the side and speak with them. And general classroom modifications that are at our disposal. Okay, so that kind of sums up the tier, but let's look at what behaviors probably should fall under tier 1. So what we did is we broke this down into categories for you, and this is a worksheet on Google Classroom. If you want to search for that, you can pull this up and it will show all 3 tier levels of behavior. But they're broken down into these categories. So In terms of vocalizations, yeah, we're going to see blurting out here. We're going to see yelling, screaming, laughing at inappropriate times. All our annoying kind of type behaviors, annoying noises might fall under this category. In terms of movement, we're fidgeting. We get out of our seat a little bit, tapping on pencils, running out of our assigned areas. In terms of physical, we might see some roughhousing here, okay? Pushing our peers, goofing off, throwing things, but not really dangerous at this point. There's no, what they're throwing will not result in injury. Compliance, yeah, we're not seeing very good compliance at this level. We're saying no, lack of self-control. And in terms of engagement, yeah, we're disengaged, we're not focused, we're not paying attention. It's something that still at this point, redirections can change the behavior. They just need reminders and maybe they quickly snap back to attention. In terms of property, we're taking things that don't belong to us, but we're doing it in more of like, I'm gonna take it and to get your reaction, right? It's not a devious kind of taking of materials yet. In terms of bodily fluids, yeah, we might see spitting on surfaces and then accidents, okay? So that's kind of how we're categorizing this level of behavior. Let's take a look at tier 2 behaviors. Okay, so again, like Alex said, this is the level that we're gonna focus on today. And so by the end of the day, every individual teacher, staff member here is gonna leave with a specific behavior plan for a real student in your classroom, okay? So this is more moderate levels of behavior. At this level, we might have 3 to 4 students in our classroom, okay? And you could probably think of that little bunch that you're having consistent behavior issues within your classroom. We'd say, yeah, the teacher can address these behaviors, but now we're starting to reach out for help, right? We've gone to our principals, we've gone to our administrators, we've gone to our specialists, our school psych specialists, our speech paths, our TOSAs. We're reaching out for assistance, maybe we've called parents, we've held some conferences. This is the level that we're gonna be focusing on today. And we can see there, yeah, we're gonna need a plan at this point. It's gone beyond tier 1. We need to get a formal plan in action and start to collect some level of data. So what are tier 2 behaviors? Kind of what we're gonna see here is we're gonna see a lot of tier 1 behaviors, but ramped up to the next level, okay? So in terms of those vocalizations, that screaming, that blurting out, we're seeing it continuously now, more frequently. And simple redirections, reminders are not stopping the behavior, okay? We'd see maybe targeted threats. Whereas tier 1, we were name calling, maybe a little cursing here, but now we're actually targeting someone. We're saying something, maybe we're threatening to hurt someone or to kick someone real specifically. In movement, we're hitting objects now, or hitting objects together, we're making noise, things that could potentially cause damage to property. In terms of where we should be, we might run out of the classroom, but we haven't left the building yet. So that we consider that tier 2. We're out of our assigned area, but now we've kind of left the classroom. In terms of physical, we might see some hitting, punching, kicking here, but an isolated, non-reoccurring incident, okay? So it was a one-time hit and then we stopped. We could step in and give a verbal redirection and that behavior stopped. We're throwing objects that have the potential, maybe they didn't cause injury, but have the potential to cause injury. Isolated, inappropriate touching over the clothes, okay, so it's self-explanatory. Yeah, repeated refusal to comply now. So we're seeing tier 1 behaviors just ramped up. Okay, the redirections aren't working, the reminders aren't working. Engagement, to this point, it's becoming a continuous disruption. It's disrupting that student and others around them. Property, now maybe we're taking property, but we're not telling that person, right? We stole something and we had no plans to ever mention that. So that's kind of a different level when we're talking about taking things that don't belong to us. Maybe we're destroying property, but still easily replaceable, okay? Not high value items. Bodily fluids, we're spitting on others, or we're having more intentional accidents. So we'll talk about the function of behavior, but there's usually a reason why we do the things we do. And so that last one, intentional accidents, might fall into that category, all right? So by definition, if we only have 3 tiers of behavior, tier 3 has to be the most severe, right? So anything we didn't talk about already has to go into this category. So this would be our most severe behaviors that we could see. Now, You may not have any students in your classroom showing these behaviors. We hope not, right? But if you were to, it would probably be just that one special case, that one special circumstance where you're seeing a student demonstrate tier 3 behaviors. Yeah, absolutely, the classroom teacher has already reached out by this point, and a more formal intervention plan would be needed, okay? It's either an emergency situation where someone's kind of running down to your classroom, or we've already met several times and we have to make a real formal plan at this point, okay? So formal intervention plan and then data collection is a must. So let's talk about what are these tier 3 behaviors, okay? So in terms of what we could say, vocalizations, we're making homicidal threats, we're threatening to kill someone, suicidal threats. Any possession of weapons or drugs would fall into the tier 3 category. Now, we can be out of our seat at tier 1, we can be out of the classroom at tier 2. At tier 3, we're leaving the building, okay? We're getting off school property. They've left the playground and we're seeing, and they're gone, okay? That's tier 3. Physically, we're seeing continuous aggression, okay? Multiple punches and kicks that don't stop when I just say stop doing that. We have to physically intervene at this point. That's tier 3 aggression. Multiple counts of throwing objects, and maybe they have caused injury to others, okay? Scissors, sharp things, heavy objects. Sexual aggression under the clothing would fall into this category. Compliance, really anything that could maybe result in injury or danger to the student. So for an example, I was working with a student one time and he wasn't hitting me, he wasn't hitting the other staff, and he wasn't hurting himself, but in the room that we were in, there was a fuse box, okay? Some kind of electrical fuse box, and he was kind of clawing away at the fuse box, trying to get into that. So, and we directed him, right? We of course said, don't do that, stop doing that, please come have a seat. And he wouldn't, so I think that's where compliance would reach that tier 3 level, those special circumstances. And engagement, of course we're not engaged, all right? We don't really address that at this point. We're well beyond engagement. Property, so we kind of assign a monetary value here. What I want you to know is this would be high value items, okay? So we're in computer lab and we're going down the line and destroying several computers. We're throwing iPads, things that are not easily replaceable. So furniture, maybe structural damage at this point. And in terms of bodily fluids, yeah, it can go to that next level, right? And so that's kind of self-explanatory when it comes to tier 3. Okay, so let's go back to our poll. Now that we've had that teaching moment, let's go back and look at those questions and see if we can kind of come more to more agreement. We'll just maximize, yeah, and then go back to tier 1. Okay. So I was just informed there was a 1-minute delay from the video going out to all the other schools. So I think we probably would have had more consistent agreement. I think it was trending that way. Just for time's sake, we had to go to the next questions, okay? So I just want you to keep that in mind. Even so, I've ran a poll similar to this, and we do see some variance there, right? And so we want to bring that together. A lot of times we do see it trend towards the more correct answer, but we'll talk about that. Okay. So the first question, a student screams at a teacher and refuses to do their work, okay? So class, kind of a group call out here. What do we think that behavior was now that we've kind of taught? Yeah, so Westwood here is kind of calling out tier 1, and that would be the correct answer. And I think when we did our poll, we kind of had some, we were kind of trending between tier 1 and tier 2. So in terms of vocalization, we saw that screaming out, which is inappropriate, and then in terms of engagement, we're not doing our work. Okay. Question 2 was, a student is repeatedly banging their head on a wall, hard enough to cause injury to that student. Okay, so Westwood, just kind of a call out for us after we taught that. What do we think that is? Yes. Okay, everybody's saying 3 here. That's correct. So kind of the key words there, when we're looking at behavior, we're looking at describing things. The key word, repeatedly, right? They were doing it over and over. A student could get mad and just kind of go lightly, you know, tap their head on the wall just out of frustration. But we're doing this repeatedly. And the other key phrase there is hard enough to cause damage or injury to the student. Okay, so we definitely think that was tier 3. We're testing my memory here. Yeah, you might have to pull that up, yeah.
I love technology when it works, and it's so much fun when it does it in front of lots of people.
All right, we'll give that.
Keep working on it.
Yeah, we'll give that just a second. So another behavior that we had is, a student punches a peer, okay, and then runs out of the classroom and stands by the door. They appear to be very angry. Okay, so based on what we know, kind of look for some of those keywords there. Westwood, what behavior, what tier do we think that behavior would fall under? Yeah, tier 2. Okay, so we've had questions yet. Well, they punched a student. Now, yes, one punch could cause significant injury, right? But there are levels to behavior. They could have continually punched the student and caused more injury and not stopped after one punch, right? So they punched one time, and where did they go? They left the classroom, right? We know that we kind of have a pattern of behavior here. They left our classroom, they're going to stand by the door. So we're going to call that a tier 2 behavior. Okay, so our 4th behavior, students rolling on the floor and spitting on the carpet. Okay, what are we going to call that? Okay, tier 1. Yeah, so spitting isn't appropriate, it's gross, but there's levels to spitting, right? We could be spitting on others. So there are levels to that. So we call that a tier 1. A student curses at a peer and threatens to kick the peer in the face. Are we going to call this tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3?
And spit on tier 2.
Yeah, tier 2. Okay. So the cursing, yeah, cursing might fall under tier 1. Okay, depending on the threat there. But we had the point where the student threatened, kind of targeted that peer, threatened to hurt them. Was very specific about it. So we go ahead and call that tier 2. Okay. Let's go back to our slides. Okay, so I've talked for quite a bit now. Now I want you to talk in your grade level groups. I want you to take that behavior that you thought of in the beginning, and I want you to turn and talk to your group, and I want you to answer these questions. Would the behavior that you selected fall into tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? Is this different from what you maybe thought before? Okay, and are there other behaviors that you're observing in your classroom that didn't fall into any of those categories? If so, we want you to write those down. Folks on the live stream, if you'll just talk to your proctor and write those in the chat box. And we want to make sure we make a really good comprehensive tiered chart. So if there's anything that we missed, go ahead and do that. And so we're going to go ahead and do that now. So discuss with your groups, and we're going to take about 3 minutes to discuss. So go ahead and do that now.
Because they got to fight with each other, but they don't display that regularly. That's
Okay, as we're wrapping up those discussions, we're going to go ahead and watch
Where did the Boston Tea Party occur?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Very good, very good, very good. Okay. Let's see. Who were the Axis powers?
The Nazis and the Italians.
No, they were not part of the Axis. They were not part of the Axis. Hey, Dan, pay attention. Okay, this is going to be on the test. Very good. Who were the Allies in World War II?
England, France, Americans.
Okay, any more? A few more. Okay, we think French.
Oh.
Yes.
Burmese.
No. Think north of us. Hey, Dan! Stop that! Don't be disruptive. Canadian, yes, very good. Yes. All right, and what about Vietnam?
That was the Americans and the Japanese.
Hey, Dan! Sit down! Sit down! I'm tired of disruptive behavior.
My grandpa was into it.
Okay, so we just saw disruptive Dan.
All right, so Westwood, tell me some of the behaviors you saw from Dan. Just go ahead and call those out. What behaviors did we see?
Leaving his chair.
Leaving his chair. What else?
Not engaged.
Not engaged. What else?
Talking to other students.
Talking to other students.
Sleeping.
Sleeping.
Making noises.
Slinging his notebook. Okay. So yeah, easy to see a lot of behaviors there. Yeah, don't assault the student as they're trying to leave there. But let's talk a little bit more about behavior. So we just want to give you a little preview here. So this is the first section in our behavior menu. Okay, so we have this theme. When we go out to eat, nice restaurant, we're going to have an appetizer, we're going to have our main course, and then our dessert. And so this is how we're going to kind of break down our behavior plan, break down our behavior menu. So the first part is going to be appetizers. We're going to pick our student, we're going to fill in some information and kind of go from there. But we just called out some behaviors. Let's talk about a little bit more, what is a behavior, okay? So a behavior is anything a person could do, okay? So almost everything. Two key features that every behavior must have. So if we're talking about behavior, we have to have these two things. We have to be able to observe it, okay? If I can't see it and someone else can't see it, it's not a behavior, okay? So very basic, number one. Number two, it has to be able to be measured, okay? We have to find some way to count it, some way to jot it down in data collection. So those are the two defining things that we have to have if we're talking about behavior. A smart person that works here in this district told me it's not a behavior if you can't graph it, okay? So I want you all to remember that. If you can't find a way to graph what you're talking about, if you can't find a way to measure what you're talking about, you do not have a behavior, okay? What it is you probably do, we probably just need to redefine it, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So in order to know if we're talking about a behavior or if we have a good definition of behavior, we need to pass two tests, okay? And one of those is the stranger test. So very simply what that's saying is if a complete stranger, someone that's never been in your classroom before, came in and they read your definition of that behavior, they should be able to easily spot out that behavior, okay? There shouldn't be any question like, I think they did it, I'm not sure. No, your definition should be that good, that specific, that there's no doubt that that is the behavior that you're wanting to target, okay? Therefore, data collection should be consistent, okay? So if we have two teachers that sat on different sides of the room, we're observing a student and we're collecting data on a behavior, if it passed the stranger test, then at the end of that data collection, we should pretty much have the same frequency, the same count of behaviors. Maybe it happened 10 times. We should be very close, okay? So that's what a behavior is. There's another test we need to look at. Let's talk about what is not a behavior. Okay, so we passed the stranger test, we need to pass the dead man test. So sometimes, I think I heard a few of these when we were calling out disruptive Dan. Okay, so if it doesn't pass the dead man test, it's not a behavior. So what it's saying is, if a dead man can do that, that's not a behavior. So let's look at what a dead man can do. So they're just not listening. They're not paying attention. Okay, they're not engaged. They're not responding. They're not doing their work. Okay, those are all things a dead man can do. What we mean by that is, you're not really telling me what the student is doing. You're telling me what they're not doing. Okay, so stranger test, dead man test, very important. Let's talk about defining a behavior. You know, why do we want to define our behavior? Well, in the long run, it's going to make the process more consistent. It makes it objective. It gives us good data collection. And when we have all those things, we can come up with effective interventions. Okay? It's really important to do this the right way if we want good results. So let's talk about what a good definition would include. So we want these points here. We want to describe what does it actually look like. Okay? So the student's being defiant. What does that mean? That doesn't really tell me what that behavior looked like. So what I'm going to say is the student stood up out of their chair, walked over to the bookshelf. Okay, that tells me the setup to the behavior, what I'm having an issue with. I specifically told you what that student's doing. Okay, let's talk about where does it occur. Okay, so maybe it occurs in the art classroom, right, with Mrs. Smith, the art teacher, and the task is painting. Okay, so when I have all three of those things, that's when I'm seeing this behavior that I have a problem with, that I wanted to target. Okay, what degree does the behavior occur? So here's where we have to maybe look at our definition and make kind of a rating scale, a Likert scale. Let's say like a 1 through 5. So if we stick with our example of painting, maybe at a 1, the student is painting something they're not supposed to be painting. Okay, the assignment is paint an elephant, and they're painting a rock concert. Okay, they're off task. But over here at a 5, they're taking the paint and they're throwing it onto the wall and they're smearing it onto their face. Okay, so that's an intensity skill. And then we have everything else in between. Sometimes we need to define behavior that way. And then really important, the data collection piece. So how often does it happen? Can we just simply count the occurrences of that behavior? Can we look at duration? Maybe the behavior doesn't happen that frequently, but when it does, we want to time how long the episodes last, right? So maybe we defined our behavior real well, and let's look at duration. So maybe we had a 2-minute episode of that behavior. The other time we had 30 seconds. So we can look to measure behavior that way, okay? Things to avoid when defining behavior. Let's avoid those big old categories, okay? They're rude, they're disrespectful, they're defiant, they're just being bad, okay? So that kind of tells me how you feel about the behavior, right? When you're kind of describing those things, but it doesn't really tell us what we're collecting data on. It doesn't really tell us what actually happened, right? So avoid the big old categories, avoid mental states. So the two defining pieces of a behavior are we have to be able to measure it and we have to be able to observe it. Okay, so we can't directly observe what someone's thinking. Okay, so we can make assumptions, implications here. We can say they were angry, they knew what they were doing. Again, that really doesn't tell us what they did, what the behavior was. And so we can't target that. We have to measure the outward appearance of the behavior, okay? The outward structure. What do they actually do? Maybe they are angry, but what is it that they're doing that we need to target? Let's define the behavior in terms of what is happening, okay? Not what isn't happening. So just like in good teaching, we're going to teach students what to do, not what not to do. Okay, we need to define our behavior the same way. Okay, so if you'll pull up Google Classroom, there is a handout there on examples of definitions of behavior. Go ahead and have that ready. So we talked about defining behavior. Let's just look at a few good examples of what a good definition of behavior is. So we have them big old categories here, but we kind of defined it. So we could just say, hey, they're being off task, or we could say it's any engagement other than the assigned task. Whoa, that's very specific, right? So if the assignment is we're working on math, if they're doing anything else besides math, I'm going to count that. I'm going to collect data on that. because your definition was that specific. But wait a minute, let's add a time to it. So what's reasonable for your age, for your grade level? So any engagement in any other task other than the assigned task for more than what's reasonable in your classroom. Is 10 seconds to be off task okay? They're thinking, they're kind of gathering themselves. Is 30 seconds appropriate? You can make that determination. It's up to you to define your behavior, define what you want to target and to change. Okay, and so in Google Classroom, we have several more examples of those. Go ahead and pull that up because we're going to do a little activity. Now, this is very important for the rest of the presentation. I want you to think of a student currently in your classroom that you're having behavior difficulties with. Okay, we're going to do this individually, and you're going to fill this in on Google Classroom. Okay, so all of you have that student, and I want you to think Tier 2 level behavior. Okay, so go ahead and think of that real life student. We're going to go into Google Classroom, and we're going to pull up our behavior menu. Okay, we're going to start to fill this out. By the time we leave here today, the behavior menu will be completed, and you'll have a full behavior plan to take back to your class for a specific student. So go to the appetizer section, and we're going to fill in the student information, the student's name, what information we do know right now, their strengths. And I want you to think of our definition. I want you to use the assignment in the Google Classroom, the worksheet, and I want you to make a specific, observable, measurable definition of that behavior. Okay? There's several examples in there that you can use, and we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to take 10 minutes for this first activity, and you can start now. I'm going to set a timer. Hey guys, so there's an example behavior menu, and then there's a target student behavior menu. You want to go to the target student behavior menu. It's blank, and you can start to fill that one in. The other one's just an example. So make sure you find the blank menu. That's what you'll be working from. Hey guys, we're getting some reports that you can't get into the target behavior menu, so we're going to re-upload that and give everyone else in the schools more time to work on that. So just know we're working on it. Check 1, 2. Can you hear me now? No.
I just assigned it again. It should be very close. Okay.
So guys, we're going to re-upload the form. Alex is doing that now. We had some comments that we couldn't get into the blank form, so we're working on that now for schools coming through on the live stream. So just hold tight, and we'll give you some extra time for it.
You know,
makes noises. I think that we make like disruptive noises constantly. Just something to just like distract you.
You can.
What are my options?
Oh my gosh. Yes, and I was I know that the last is so like I was trying to imitate it, and I don't know if it is a message after
Was a timer from onlinestopwatch.com. They have several different timers on there. So if you haven't checked out that website, there's quite a few different ones, and we're going to show you some different timers throughout the presentation. The reason we're going to show you these is this is a really good strategy for any of your kids to help them know how much time they have, when they need to be done, and when you're transitioning. So you'll get to experience some nice little timers throughout. I hope that everybody was able to find the behavior menu. We went ahead and reposted it again at the very top of the classroom. So you should see that as an assignment. There's also an example posted in the announcements. Some questions are asked about confidentiality. If you are using a student's name on there, you do not have to turn it in. I'm not going to be checking to see if people turn it in. So that's kind of up to you there, but it'll keep it in your classroom on your classroom drive for as long as you have it. So if you're concerned about that, don't turn it in, or you can put a fake name as well if you would like to. So we're going to go ahead and keep going, and we're going to talk about the ABCs of behavior. So one of my struggles always as a teacher is that I couldn't control a kid's behavior. I cannot make them stop doing something. I didn't have any control over that. But what I learned as I learned more about behavior is that there are two areas that I do have control over. And that's the antecedent and the consequence to behavior. So an antecedent is anything that happens right before the behavior. So this might be a verbal direction to do work. This might be that the bell rang. This might be that their friend laughed. Anything that happens right before a behavior is called an antecedent. Today we'll spend some time talking about antecedent strategies. So that's going to be strategies that we can do before a behavior ever occurs to reduce its likelihood. Then of course, if we're looking at ABC's behavior, right in the middle is the behavior. This is the response to what happened. Okay, anything, action, movement, it's what the kid did. Right after the antecedent is the consequence. Now, I'm not talking about did they get in trouble. The consequence is right after, whatever comes right after a target behavior, and whatever comes right after is what is either going to make the behavior keep happening or make the behavior less likely to happen. So again, we're going to look at some consequence strategies, things that you can do after a behavior happens to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or if it's a desired behavior, something you want the kid to do, to make sure that it keeps happening. And since those are the two spots where we can control things, that's where we're going to spend our time working and developing a plan. So let's talk about little Johnny for a little bit. Little Johnny, every time his teacher gives a math assignment, starts screaming expletives and banging on his desk. Okay, and then the teacher says, go to the principal's office. Right, Allison? That's fine. It's every time. So in this scenario, the antecedent is that the teacher says, here's your math work. The behavior is little Johnny starts screaming expletives, little Johnny starts banging on his desk, and the consequence is the teacher says, go to the principal's office. Now, when we're trying to pick strategies and trying to determine how we're going to work with behavior, we've got to know the function of the behavior, why the kid is doing this. Some people call this the communicative attempt, why the kid is doing what they're doing. And we break this down into 4 reasons. That's going to be escape, attention, access to tangibles, and sensory. So escape is that a kid wants to get out of something. Sometimes this is attention, sometimes this is a demand, whatever it is they want to get out of it. Sometimes they're doing a behavior for attention. This could be adult attention or it could be peer attention. And I also want to note that attention does not always have to be positive attention. A lot of our kiddos will do behavior just to get you to give them some negative, like reprimand type attention. Access to tangibles is that the kid wants something. There's something they're wanting, and that's why they're doing this behavior. The last one is sensory, and it's that a student engages in this behavior because they have a sensory need. We're not really going to focus on sensory needs because it's not something we see a lot of in the general education classroom. Kindergarten teachers, I'm going to pick on you for a second. You would kind of be the only exception. We still do kind of at that age see some behaviors tied towards sensory. And maybe if there's pre-K teachers in your building, they may also experience that. But for the most part, a general ed student is not going to have sensory needs. So why look at the function? And it's like I said before, we want to look at the function because we can tailor those interventions that we're picking, all those things that we're going to do before a behavior occurs and after a behavior occurs, so we can pick those to be more effective. The other thing we're going to do is we want to pick a replacement behavior. So when little Johnny's going, me, hey, hey, woo, okay, and we want to pick something different, we want it to serve the same function. If he's doing that so that he gets attention, we want to make sure that he knows how to raise his hand nicely and get attention that way and replace it. But if we don't know why he's doing it, then we're not going to be able to pick our strategies very well. So we're going to look at, when we're trying to figure out function, what happens right before a behavior and what happens right after to help us figure it out. So let's take the same scenario with little Johnny. Let's say every time his teacher assigns math, he bangs on the table, yells expletives, and he gets sent to the principal's office. But every time his teacher assigns reading or writing, he does this work and he gets an A. So once you turn to your partner or your table mates, what do you think might be the reason why little Johnny is banging on his table every time he gets math work? Okay, some of the things I'm hearing is he's frustrated. He doesn't know how to do it. Guys, that's escape function. He wants to get out of math because he's not good at doing math. Okay, so looking at what happened right before is really helpful for us to know, okay, how do I target an intervention for little Johnny? The other thing we can look at is what happens right after. And I'm going to give you a real life example. So my little boy, who is almost 2, every time we open the garage door, makes a beeline down my driveway. You might think that this is for escape. He wants to get out of something. But really what he wants is for mom and dad to run down the driveway as fast as they can and catch him. So really, the reason for him running down my driveway is not to get away from us. It's so that he gets more attention and all the attention from both of us. So we really have to be critical thinkers when we're thinking about the reasons why these behaviors are occurring. But if I didn't reflect on, okay, what's happening after he runs down, it's not that he's getting out of anything. It's that mom and dad are both going, no, stop running down the driveway. I wouldn't know that attention is the function of the behavior. So the very same thing is going to be true of your students. So let's take little Johnny again. And let's say every time the teacher gives math homework, he yells expletives, he bangs on his desk. Now, if every time the teacher goes, go to the principal's office, and we say little Johnny got out of math, we're going to say, you know what? I think that's probably an escape function. But let's say instead of that, the teacher keeps going and all the other kids start laughing at him. That's pretty funny. He's making kind of a fool of himself. We might say, okay, little Johnny's really doing this because he wants attention from his peers. But let's say that this teacher's like, I've got to get through this lesson. We've got testing coming up. You've got to learn this skill. Okay, little Johnny, if you will just be quiet, I will give you candy in exchange for your silence. Well, then we would say, I think little Johnny's doing this because he learned pretty fast. If he throws a fit, he's going to get candy out of this deal. So it's really important for us to know function so that we can tailor what we do to help students. Now, I'm going to give you this scenario, and I want you to think about how the same behavior could have different functions depending on the reason. So you're going to turn and talk to your table, and I want you to come up with an attention, escape, and an access to tangibles reason why little Rachel might bite another student. So little Rachel's biting another student. You're thinking of an escape, an attention, or a tangible function for this.
Frustration. Yeah. Attention. If they're frustrated. Or mom gets called. Yeah, that could be. Yeah. She doesn't like this. Sensory. 2-year-old. Well, what if every I'm thinking like okay, if I could get your attention back up here. Live audience, if I could get, or virtual audience, if I could get your attention too. I heard some really great reasons why Rachel might bite another student. Can someone just yell out what they think an escape function would be? If you bite somebody, you get sent home, so you get out of lots of school. That's a great one. What about attention? What might be a reason she would bite for attention? Because she says she doesn't have any friends. She doesn't have any friends, so anytime she bites, everybody goes, teacher comes, talks to her, all her friends are freaking out. She's got a lot of attention that time, right? She probably gets to go talk to the counselor about biting. The counselor's a really nice lady. She gets some attention there. Okay, what about a tangible function? This is probably the hard one, I think, is what I heard from a lot of people. Okay, that's what I was thinking of when I thought about this. If Matt's holding the race car that she wants and she bites him, what is Matt going to do with the race car? He's going to drop it, she gets the race car, and he's going to go run and talk to his teacher. So the same behavior, biting little Matt, could have a lot of different reasons that happened, but the only way we would know why that happened is if we looked at what happens right after. So sometimes it's really easy to look at a behavior and go, I know this kid's trying to get out of doing math. It's really easy. Sometimes it's a little bit harder. So one of the resources available to you is Ventura County, which is, they gave us permission to use these, has put together these kind of documents on the 20 most common behaviors. You'll see a link to their website in the announcements. It's toward the end of the classroom. And if you pull up, let's say the dishonesty one, it will give you examples of why a kid might be dishonest based upon the functions that we talked about. So that's one resource that you guys have if you're sitting like, I don't know why this kid's doing this. That's a good place to start. Another place to start is using a indirect assessment to determine behavior. So Mike is going to talk to you a little bit about how you could use that tool to determine the function of the behavior that you're looking at.
All right, yeah, so there are different forms assessments out there that will help us if we can't use some of the strategies Alex talked about to determine the function. And one of those is the motivation assessment scale. Okay, so I want everyone to go to Google Classroom, and I want you to find the assignment that says Motivation Assessment Scale, 2nd edition. And we're actually going to complete this scale. Okay, we're going to complete this scale on our student that we chose and on our behavior that we just defined. Okay, so I'll give everyone a minute.
It's doing the same thing as the other one.
Okay, we're going to re-upload that form. So everyone just give us a moment. So what we're going to look at on this scale is, and I can probably pull that up.
Go to the next slide.
Okay. Okay, so this is kind of an image of what the scale is going to look like. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our definition, our good definition that we created for our student of that behavior that we're looking at. We're going to copy and paste it into this scale, okay? And then we're going to answer several questions about the behavior. And we're going to rate these on how often they occur. So looking at the scale here, like the first question says, would the behavior occur continuously over and over if this person was left alone for long periods of time? Okay, so kind of unprompted, in the absence of instruction or direction, would the behavior still occur? And what we're gonna rate that on the frequency. So either that never happens, 0, it almost never happens, a 2 would be sometimes, 3 would be about half the time, 4 would be usually, 5 would be almost always, and 6 would be it always happens, okay, in the absence of the person just being left alone for long periods of time. Okay, so we'll give you, once we get that reposted, we'll give you about 10 minutes to go through that. Okay, I've been told it's just been reposted. Okay, so find that at the very top of your Google Classroom. And remember, as we answer each question, we're not just talking about any and all behaviors that we see from the student. We're talking specifically about our target behavior that we chose. As you go through the scale, there are about 4 or 5 functions at the bottom of the scale. And those will change in ranking based on how you rate these items. Okay? And so when we get to the bottom, it's going to give us a predicted function of why this behavior is occurring. Okay? Is it escape? Is it escape from attention? Are they trying to gain attention? Okay? Are they trying to access tangible items? Is there something they're wanting from us? A toy, candy, some kind of reward? Is that the function of why they exhibit this behavior? Okay. Westwood, are you guys finding that scale? Okay, so Westwood's finding that scale. Let us know in the chat box if you're having any issues accessing the scale. And we're going to take 10 minutes to fill that out, and that's going to give us a predicted function. look at what comes in second, okay? And use your best judgment. The second runner-up function might more accurately describe why the behavior is occurring, okay? So look at your top rate functions. And then we're going to also add this into our behavior menu. Okay?
We're going to give you 15 minutes to do this instead of 10. And it took our test group about 7. So while you're doing this, if you need to take a break, get a drink of water, run to the bathroom, get up, walk around, feel free to do that. And we'll go ahead and put 15 minutes on the clock for you guys as well. And yes, we're going to do the fish one. It's already pulled up if you wanted to.
Which one?
What? Wonderful? Chandler. Wonderful in your class? Oh.
He's almost always really good at
Okay.
No, I said maybe not. Well, because that's his mom said that he has something that's working towards. Yeah, but she's told you that but yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. Because he can't work one day. Yeah, but you're doing that. Come one more day and then we have to talk. No, we don't want to.
He was still trying to do that's just not with everyone else. Because a lot of times because of taxes. That's where I have ours first.
If you kind of skip to the bottom, you can see that they shift as you answer.
For me, yes.
I know, yeah.
Working? When you stop paying attention to him, like if you try to ignore him and not give him any attention, he still continues. If he's wanting attention, he still continues to do it if you stop even if he's
He's good at that case.
Good to know.
Yeah, I feel like this one's just I know that's me. So it's like, does it stop shortly after? She's done.
Yeah, you know what? You can
Connor used to do that.
Anne, are you doing your assignment?
Is that
I think Susan's escaping demands. But
There was a flip chart for ELD, and that has to change. This will change the resolution. But I had to do for flip charts. Right. But I don't touch them.
They are. But I knew what mine was. Mine wants to be
Walk through here. Walk through the center of the room.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
That's why I decided to also stay. Yeah, I think so. Because I noticed when I get to eat off my probably when it comes to that's why I thought, oh, you're on your way. Except for the ones that are out.
There are other things I
And I'm
you do this after.
I know what that is. When he lays it out,
Okay, so I hope in that amount of time that you were able to finish your function assessment or at least give yourself a pretty good idea of what function might be. If you look at the very bottom of the assessment, even if you didn't get to finish all the questions, although I think you probably did, it will go ahead and rank just the information that you inputted. So on your behavior menu, right under where you described your behavior, there is a box to put the function of the student's behavior. So I'm going to give you all 3 minutes, and all I want you to do is write a function statement for the behavior. If you have some questions about what that might look like, you might refer to that example behavior menu that's in your classroom. So all you're going to put is little Johnny's behavior, the function of little Johnny's behavior is escape, or it's attention, whatever it may be. And go ahead and add a little bit of information if you would like to, if you know. I think it's escape because he gets out of doing this work. Or I think it's attention because all of his peers turn and look at him. Okay, so add that little bit of information to your box. I'll give you a few minutes to do that real quick. You can click on here. And just, you're going to make your best guess. You're going to make your best guess. Just, you're picturing your function and putting it in that box. It's escape, it's attention. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, that's one of the things where, like, those assessments can be really helpful. That might get you a good idea. The stuff that Ventura County did is really, really good. If you get a chance to check it out, there's a lot more in those packets than just what I'm referring to, but I mean, it literally goes hitting. Okay, here's 4 different ways it could be hitting. And honestly, for sometimes we're just gonna have to make our best guess. And as you'll see when we work on this, not all your strategies are gonna be tied to functions. Some of them are, but some strategies we can just try. Okay, we're going to try these strategies because we know those are good overall strategies. And a lot of times when it's like multifaceted and stuff like that, we just kind of have to make our best guess. If you see kind of a pattern or... Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've said in special ed before, don't call the behavior team unless it's through tier 3 or a lot of tier 2.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So we hope you have your function identified and written into your behavior menu. We're going to look at our sample behavior menu for little Johnny to kind of give you some direction on what your behavior plan should look like. So for our target behavior for little Johnny, we had in Mrs. Smith's classroom, when given a math assignment by Mrs. Smith, Johnny begins to yell expletives and bangs his hands on his desk with enough volume and force to be heard in the hallway. That lasts for more than 5 seconds. Okay, so a very concrete, objective definition that we can collect data on. And so when we did our motivation assessment scale, we got the following function. So we're going to make this assumption. The probable function of Johnny's behavior is escape. He does not want to work on his math, so he exhibits the target behaviors to try to get out of completing his math assignments. Okay, so that's where we're at so far. Now we want to jump into the main course of our behavior menu. We're going to take a look at antecedents. So let's talk about antecedents, what they are. So quite simply, an antecedent, like Alex said, is any event that comes right before our target behavior. Okay, so examples, some general examples might be the bell rings. Okay, we give an instruction, a question is asked, maybe we hand the student an assignment. So with little Johnny, we're handing the math assignment, and then we know directly after that we're going to see that target behavior. Maybe another student comes up to little Johnny and says something. An activity could start or it could stop. It could be time to clean up. Class, I want you to just call out for your specific scenario. I want you to think of some things that you know, you're pretty confident in your behavior. You've seen this many times. What are some more specific examples that you'd see in a school that are happening right before your behavior? Just go ahead and call some of those out. Maybe a certain assignment's given, you're doing something, another student did something.
Running late.
Okay, we're running late. So maybe the classroom is behind?
Or the parents that morning.
The student. Okay, the student comes late to the classroom. Okay, that's an antecedent to our target behavior that we're seeing. What else?
Transitioning.
Transitions. Okay, so transitioning from one activity to the other. That's our antecedent. That's what happens directly before our behavior. Any other examples?
Changing the schedule.
Changing the schedule. Okay. Yeah, very important. Maybe we kind of have no control of that. This is a unique day. We're on a different bell schedule. Some kind of activity is going on in our school that day. Any other examples? Those are good examples. Those are antecedents, okay? So like Alex said, if we're wanting to control behavior, change behavior, we have to look right before and right after the behavior occurs, okay? Before we talk more about antecedents, let's talk about setting events. Now, you guys as teachers are really good at identifying setting events, okay? A setting event kind of sets the scenario or stage for which the behavior occurs. It may in and of itself not be the antecedent, the trigger to the behavior, but it kind of it's our setting, right? It's something going on that either sometimes we don't have control over those, and sometimes we do. Let's talk about setting events. So setting events, those could be biological factors, okay? The student is tired, the student's hungry, they're thirsty. All these factors come into play, right? If we're hungry and thirsty, we usually act quite a bit differently than we normally do, even as adults, right? Current medications, so they started a new medication. We don't always have that knowledge, or not always privileged to have that, but sometimes we do know that could be setting the stage for different behaviors. Illnesses, okay? We just physically feel different, okay? We're gonna see different behaviors. Any kind of learning, self-regulation issues, maybe we see this behavior in reading instruction, okay? That's not quite the antecedent, but it's our setting to which the behavior occurs. So setting events are important to know because when we look to intervene, sometimes we can account for some of the changes that setting events set up for us. So any kind of learning difficulties, poor organization, they just naturally have poor anger management skills. Any kind of social, emotional disorders, they're known to have an anxiety disorder. They're dealing with depression, okay, kind of things beyond our control. We can still do things to accommodate for that and intervene, but we can't control some of these factors. Previous negative interactions, maybe this behavior occurs consecutively in a specific classroom. What's going on in there? Were there, in an earlier grade, were they having issues, again, in this specific classroom? Any kind of issues at home, any kind of altered routines, okay? So we said that could be a setting event. We're on a different bell schedule. We have a pep rally at the end of the day. We're having some kind of holiday event. The absence of a preferred caregiver. Okay, so we know little Johnny's staying at grandmother's house, right? We just know that, okay? And when he stays with grandma, he doesn't get to sleep, okay? Because grandma takes him to yard sales and buys him anything he wants, and he eats a whole Tostitos pizza and gets an extra large milkshake from McDonald's, okay? So that's setting up an event to see behavior. That was my childhood, by the way, I just described. So, loud environment, so any kind of changes in noise level to our environment, that could be a setting event. So an antecedent-based intervention is just simply something that addresses the relationship between the individual's behavior and his or her surrounding environment, okay? So we're gonna look to intervene on the front end. This is an intervention that happens before the behavior occurs, okay? So why are these beneficial? Well, for the most part, we're the ones in charge of antecedents, right? We're the authority figure, we're kind of running the show. So we're in a good position to manipulate antecedents, things that come right before the behavior. So that is something we can control, and we're going to talk about how we can do that. Now, what if the antecedent is work? It's work that we have to do. Okay, we can't always take away our antecedents because it's things that we have to do, but maybe we could modify the way we present some of these triggers, some of these antecedents. Antecedent strategies are beneficial because they can have quick results. Again, if we know that when the bell rings that this behavior is going to occur, if we could stop the bell ringing, then the behavior wouldn't occur. Why don't we just do that? Well, maybe we need the bell. So maybe we just need to modify our environment. But what we're saying is antecedent strategies can have quick results because they might stop the behavior before it ever starts. And just generally, they enhance instruction. So we're happy to let you know that we have a variety of interventions to give you here today. We're going to look at those, okay? We're going to start with antecedent strategies. But let's look at the types of interventions that we have. So for antecedent strategies, we have environmental strategies. Okay, that's where we actually look at the trigger and see if it's something we can manipulate, there's something we can add or take away, or modify how we present that. I want you to keep this in mind as well. We're either looking to increase a behavior or decrease a behavior. In terms of the target behavior that we selected, that's our problem behavior, right? That's our inappropriate behavior. We're looking to decrease the frequency of that behavior. Does that make sense? So we're going to use antecedent strategies to decrease that behavior. But another way to look at antecedent strategies is to increase a more positive behavior, okay? A specific behavior that if that one is occurring, we're not going to see our problem behavior, okay? It's going to take the replacement of that. So just keep that in mind. Another category would be visual supports. So again, maybe we don't need to say the instruction. Maybe we can show the instruction. We can present it in a different way. Reinforcement. Well, wait a minute. Reinforcement comes on the back end, right? But we still have to prep for that. before we ever get to the behavior. So we're going to talk about pre-teaching behavioral expectations, teaching the student what to do if they do come into interaction with that trigger, with that antecedent, and we can pre-plan rewards upon completion. And then, very important, we want to make our interventions functional. So we took this survey, our motivation assessment scale, to hopefully give us an idea of why the behavior is occurring. What is the student getting out of that behavior? So we want to make them function-based. So if it's attention, we want to make sure we have some attention-based antecedent strategies in our plan. If it's escape, we need to look at escape antecedent interventions. All right? Just a few more considerations for choosing. So we talked about how we can't always change our setting event, right? Well, that happens at home. We can't change that. We can't change their home life, their family situation. But we could pick strategies that reduce the impact of setting events. So maybe they have they're predisposed to anxiety. They have an anxiety disorder. So as an antecedent strategy, we're going to increase structure and put routines in place to reduce the impact of that anxiety. All right? We can't ever change the anxiety, but we can put antecedent strategies in there to reduce that. Perhaps they're hungry. Okay? Again, this is at home. Our counselors are real great on this and proactive by sending food home. But maybe if we know that, we could provide snacks to reduce hunger. So we've modified our setting event. Again, we already talked about matching the strategies to the function of behavior. And then just kind of keep this in mind. And when we're talking about verbal praise and we're talking about using ourselves as a strategy, as something that's reinforcing and powerful, just make sure we have that positive relationship. Verbal praise is only powerful in the context that you have good rapport with that student, okay? Why would I care if you said good job or are giving me praise? It's because I have good rapport with you. I like you, I respect you, we've had good interactions. So in some cases, even before we get to that point where the student's done something positive to reinforce them, we may just have to reinforce them for showing up, right? They just need praise for being there, for being a student in my classroom. We may just have to start there and start to slowly build them up. All right? And Alex is going to introduce our strategies. You don't need to.
No, don't.
Okay.
Okay, so what we want to be able to equip you guys with is basically a whole bunch of strategies that you can pick from for your target student. So what we're going to be doing is a jigsaw at your table, and we're going to be looking at these 5 categories. So you're going to each pick a category, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and during the first 10 minutes, I want you to read or look at everything in your category. Now remember, as you're looking at this, you're going to be sharing this with your table mates, what's in there. So be able to do that kind of well. I don't really think in your 10 minutes you can read every little thing sometimes, but kind of get a good idea of the content that's there. So you're each going to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You're going to look at everything in your category that's going to go all the way down. And then we'll have 2 minutes for each person to share out what they had in that category. Our ultimate goal is that when you're done, you're going to have a pretty good idea of the strategies that are in that matrix. And these are by no means an exhaustive list of strategies, but this will give you a pretty good start on strategies. And then we'll give you some time to fill in strategies on your menu. I just wanted to point out there is a whole section on your menu about setting events, but that is only one part of the matrix. So person number 1, which will be the person that has the environment one, you'll have setting events. So please make sure that you spend some time sharing those resources with your group, or otherwise you're going to have a box that's empty. And if you're like me, that makes you really not like to have empty boxes. So that would be where you get that information. So you're going to have 10 minutes to look at your section, and then 2 minutes for each person to share what was in their section. You'll be able to find this antecedent strategy tab in the classroom, and I uploaded it again, so it should be there and it should work. If not, please let us know, send us a chat, and we can hopefully fix that pretty quickly. Any questions real quick about how to do that?
I mean, not
I think everybody's pretty familiar. Teachers are real familiar with Jigsaw, so that's helpful. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and put the timer up for you so you can start looking at that. And it should be the antecedent strategy assignment that's up at the top. So you can put a 10-minute.
Mine take 5.
Or wait, it would be.
When you take 4, mine is escape too. Am I in a discipline? Yeah. So you're antecedent strategy. You're 5. You're 4. Everybody. You can choose 1, 2, or 3. I will do 3. Okay.
All this trying to do is
And then I click on those blue.
Oh, I got that. I just couldn't get to it.
tried to get it before. It's a really loud timer.
Okay, so what we're going to do at this point is give each person 2 minutes to share out what they learned in their category. We're going to use my favorite, all-time favorite teacher tool timer, which is Alex's voice and cell phone, which I think is a resource most of you have is your lovely cell phone. So I'm going to give you all 2 minutes, and then when I call out switch, the next person's going to talk. Okay, first person. Your mark and set, go.
I thought we were ahead. Sorry.
No. Not my range.
But then it does talk about flexibility too.
Okay, next person, switch.
Well, okay. There we go. Let's look at Tinder. It's visual. It's a lot of visual. There's a lot of pictures, a lot of...
Okay, switch. The third person's going to share.
This is about like building a positive relationship with your students, doing interest inventories, finding out what they like, so that you can use those likes to kind of rewards. You got positive rewards, and then that one talked about how you can reward in different areas like academics, having them help you as a reward, recognizing their whatever
And giving them a choice. They get to choose what class, or they get to choose what subject.
And that last one showed that with us, where you pick from 2 choices to see what kind of rewards they prefer. They answer a bunch of questions with your answers until you see what you're right.
That same home also has where you parents, so you know their perspective is and the parents' perspective.
And then take those ideas and build on like the board meeting.
Okay, switch. The fourth person is going to present.
This is about what they are trying to prevent plan so they're suggesting take a break, but it's not like time out. They go to a designated place where they have set ball, stuff settings, a mirror where they can look at themselves and express themselves, self-calming cards, emotionally reference posters, so how you are feeling. Breaks for quick little breaks. I can see them making tons of ideas. This one here is break and provide maybe a cool down time. This one is called Ghost, right? Where they can relax. Relieve yourself from yes. Correct. From stress situation. There's go move it and we do it. And another one is hands-on activities like paper airplanes, house cars that they build, cars, fun with ABC like where they start to build sentences with.
Okay, switch. Your last person's going to do it. Share.
The way instructions are with things that they connect to students' interests, give them choices, presentations in different modes that become not the same lecture every time. So that's where I got it. But on that, it's for
Make sure that they
I'm guessing just the same strategies, not to get started.
Sure.
There's a 3-to-1, give them 3 positive, 1 negative. Providing every conversation, it should come out 3 students out of 2
Okay. That was our last 2-minute section.
All right, so guys, we've done our jigsaw activity. Now we're going to go back to our student behavior menu, the one that we're filling out. Okay, so we're going to complete the main course section of our behavior menu. So in here we're going to fill in some setting events specifically related to our student, and we're going to pick some setting strategies. Okay, we're going to take 10 minutes to do that. Identify some setting events and setting event strategies for your target student, and then let's pick 3 antecedent strategies and let's put those into our behavior menu. Okay, we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this along with a working break, so feel free to go to the restroom, get a drink during this time, but within 10 minutes let's go ahead and add those into our behavior menu, and then we'll come back to you. All right, begin.
That's good. Yes. Do you do it?
Okay, fair enough.
Try again. Try it again. It's like maybe it does go down occasionally. I was with Dalton last year, and she used it just all the time, and had that monkey with an axe. So I'll share it. No, but I mean, everybody knew it's so nice. Going yes, not the end. Yeah. In the middle of the day, like 10 o'clock, when they have been sitting for a while, and they need 2 minutes. Well, they don't sit, but it makes them focus on something and use it.
They're not, they can't see you if you get up. It's on the timer. It's like, Andy, nobody wants to get up because they assume. No, right now it's on the timer.
I already had somebody text me.
I saw you. You did wear a yellow jacket.
I did.
Right now, like, they can only see this. See the timer. There was a link, like the agenda link that was all the different colors that had all the things on it. The very last box is us, and there's a link on there. But it'll throw you off because it's like a minute to 30 seconds delay. Which is weird.
That is weird.
Yeah. The one that's in Westwood update is to get into this meeting.
Hey, well, right now they're all getting beer. I did get it today. Hey, did y'all feel like
We really have to make some how crazy that is. Yeah, all this I just saw.
like on the days?
I know she'll stay that way.
I know.
next day and jump in the pajama day. We're set for Friday.
We were like had a ball I think we were done at like 2. Just hit him.
I tried it when we were
She's important. She's got her word in 3/4.
Have you told her? Yeah.
There's a lot of sitting. That's true. I can sit all day. I know.
It's hard to get water. So I do understand but I don't
Yeah.
So she took like talked to him like they were colleagues.
Okay, guys, if you are not at your tables, if you'll make your way back, we're going to go ahead and get started again. I hope you're able to fill in your antecedent strategy section and to get a little bit of a break. We're going to move on to the next part, which would be consequence strategies. I'm going to show you a clip for one of my favorite shows.
What's this cartoon called again? Oshikuru Demon Samurai.
And it's not a cartoon, it's anime.
You know, I knew a girl in high school named Anna Mae. Anna Mae Fletcher. She was born with one nostril. Then she had this bad nose job and basically wound up with 3.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh. Hey, Kim. Yeah. You know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall.
Okay, so Sheldon in this clip is using a consequence strategy. Can anyone tell me what the consequence strategy is that he's using? Chocolate. Okay, so what is he trying to get Penny to do in this clip? Nicely, he's trying to get her to stop talking. They're interrupting anime time. So every time she does the desired behavior, he reinforced it with chocolate, which really quickly got the desired behavior to do what? Increase, right? She did it again. So that's what we want to do for our students, is we want to look at some consequence strategies, and they're going to do 2 things. They're either going to increase that desired behavior, the thing we want the kid to do, like raise their hand or ask for help or take a break. And then they're going to decrease the thing we don't want them to do. You know, blurting out, cussing, punching their friends. Also, they might look something like redirecting a student to the more desired thing, or doing something to increase safety. So if you have a kid that you know every time he gets mad punches the person next to him, we might, tell his neighbor, hey, why don't you go sit over there? So those might be things that we do that would all fall under the consequence intervention umbrella. Now, I want to talk about punishment strategies as they relate to consequence strategies. Punishment is an intervention. We use it all the time. It's a very traditional way of addressing a problem behavior. The thing, though, that research has shown us is that punishment strategies tend to be very ineffective, especially if they're not paired with positive interventions. The scary part is the research has actually shown us that they tend to get the problem behavior to increase. And I want y'all to think about this for a second. If you think about this in terms of function, let's say that little Johnny is banging on his desk and screaming because he wants to escape, get out of something. And every time he does that, we punish him and say, okay, you're going to get ISS or you're going to get sent home. Well, he just got exactly what he wanted, which was escape, and it's going to increase the likelihood he's going to keep doing that because it became a very effective method. So you have to think about that when we're thinking about what choices we're making with punishment. A lot of times, too, the punishments we pick make us feel better because we're doing something, but they're not really shaping or teaching that student any new thing. So again, if we're giving Billy, lunch detention every single time that he gets in trouble, it's not teaching him a new strategy. Likewise, if every time a kid's being disruptive, we take away minutes at recess, we end up hurting ourselves because then they didn't get to run off any of that energy. So just some thoughts about punishment as a consequence intervention. Another thing, and we're not going to take a lot of time to talk about teaching replacement behaviors because y'all are well equipped at teaching. Y'all know teaching strategies. This might be something y'all plan more time with in the future to talk about, okay, we know there's a deficit, what do we do? But just when thinking about replacement behaviors, we need to know that when we pick a replacement behavior, it needs to have the same function as the target behavior. So if they're getting attention because of their behavior, we want to teach them a new skill to get attention in a better way. So it's functionally equivalent, it's the same. We also want to make sure that we are explicitly teaching this. So a lot of times kiddos with these skill deficits never learned that skill, and so that's why they're really struggling. And so thinking about who can teach that, when can we teach that, what does that look like in our classrooms, is something to think about when we're looking at interventions. The other thing to think about is that whatever the replacement strategy is, it needs to be easier than the target behavior. So I was in a classroom and this poor teacher, this little guy kept running out of her classroom, and it was happening all the time. He would run out of the classroom and she'd run out and get him and bring him back. And so she worked really hard with her principal, got it approved, got another grade to say, yes, he can come to our recess, which was a pretty big deal because she wasn't going with him. So somebody else was watching him. And so she had worked it out for him to get extra recess time if you behave. So she told him, okay, if from the time you get to school until 10:30, if you don't run out of the room, you get extra recess, which I was like, this is a really good deal. However, it wasn't working because he had to wait 2.5 hours to get to extra recess. So it was still a lot easier for him to just run out of the classroom and the teacher ran after him and he got attention. And so even though that was a really great plan for reinforcing him and for having this strategy for him, it was a lot harder than the thing he was already doing. So we had to work with him to come up with an idea of escape, which actually just looked like he had little errands to run every hour. He would go to the office, go to the library, and do all these little errands. And that was easier because he didn't have to wait so long. So when we're thinking about picking that, we need to make sure it's easier for them to do. And the last thing is, when we're picking things that we're going to teach kids to do, we can't rely on parents to teach those to kiddos. Unfortunately, if parents had already been teaching those strategies, they probably wouldn't have that skill deficit. Yes, I think it would be a lot better if kids were learning these at home, but since that's not always the case, our plan can't be, okay, mom and dad, at home, we want you to teach him that he's got to raise his hand instead of learning out. That's going to kind of fall on us to do. But the reason I wanted to talk about teaching these replacement strategies is our kind of innate thinking is, okay, he just did the bad thing, now I'm going to teach him the good thing to do. But that's really not the time to do it. We can't teach right in the midst of these situations with these behaviors. The brain is just not wired that way. And I kind of give this example. When my husband and I are arguing, if someone came up to me and said, now Alex, you need to use your good communication strategies and say your feelings and say what you need. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to hear that right then. I'm just not. My language abilities are going down, right? Speech. If I'm in the middle of a situation and my cognitive processing, I'm not going to be able to learn a new strategy right in that moment. And so those strategies have to be taught before it happens. They have to know how to do that beforehand. Now, what we can do is if they've already learned those strategies, we can prompt them to use it right after the behavior happens. So does that kind of make sense? We can't teach them, but we can prompt to use something they've already learned. So just like if we're teaching, you know, I've seen kindergarten rules. Y'all have been doing lots of powers for reading. Where's my kindergarten? There you are. Y'all have been doing lots of reading power. Okay, well, you taught picture power before you did it, right? But you couldn't just be reading and go, okay, use your picture power right now. Okay, guys, that's not when they're going to learn it. They're going to learn it beforehand. So it's the same thing with these consequence strategies. We got to teach them beforehand, and then when it happens, we can prompt them. Just like your kiddos, you've been teaching them all these reading strategies, and when they're reading, you go, hey, why don't you try this strategy with this word? We're going to do the same thing for behavior. Now, when we're addressing a student kind of post-target behavior, so little Johnny has done, and we're talking about tier 2 guys, this is not a nice behavior. They're threatening somebody, they're hitting, hitting has occurred, they've run out of your classroom. How we address students can really help with de-escalating the situation and making sure that target behaviors don't keep happening. So some suggestions on how we could do that are here. So keeping a neutral tone and volume, because students will typically not only match your volume, but they'll go up. Now, I will say this is hard for me because I'm a loud person in general. So me really stepping back when I'm addressing a student and trying to use a more neutral tone takes a lot of work for me. But just thinking about that as you speak to a student. Also, when a target behavior occurs, we want to be as non-reactive as possible. So just think about that. If their function is attention, they're doing this to get your attention, and then you give them a lot of attention, they just got what they wanted. So as non-reactive as we can be, as limiting as we can be with the attention is helpful. Also using non-threatening body language. So that looks like maybe approaching from the side, having our hands relaxed, having relaxed facial features can be really helpful. I was talking with a teacher, and she had said the student, which typically is pretty good with her, had been sent to the principal's office. And she happened to walk by, and the principal, the assistant principal, the SRO, and the guidance counselor were all standing, and this kid was sitting. And they're all talking to him about what he did, which was really bad. Well, of course, he's not quietly taking it. He was very vocal about his feelings about this and talking back at him and telling him all kinds of stuff. So she, seeing this, went and pulled up a chair and sat down beside him and began to talk to him about the situation. And she said almost immediately he began to de-escalate because her physical approach to him, sitting beside him, was way less intimidating than 4 adults kind of leering over him. So we can do that same thing in the classroom, making sure our approach is as neutral as it can be so that our students aren't defensive and aren't reacting. Also, just thinking about avoiding talking at students, arguing it with them, using coercive language like, if you don't stop, I'm going to tell your mom. All that does is ends up getting us in a power struggle with students, and that doesn't ever end very well for anybody. Because I think on both sides, we're pretty confident we're going to be the one that wins. But on the other side, you got the kid that's pretty confident he is too. And so that tends to just not be well for anybody. So instead of having those kind of things, if we can just give simple directions, that's going to be the most effective way to kind of de-escalate a student. So going back to that teaching piece, if you already taught them a target or a replacement behavior, then you could simply say, now would be a good time to take deep breaths. However, if you haven't taught it yet, because I promise you're going to be in that situation, using very limited language and very simple directions is going to be the quickest thing. So sit down, be quiet, just very simple directions, and limiting our language. So much like I said, when I'm angry, my language ability goes down. I'm not going to be able to process a lot of talking. Our kiddos are in the same boat. When we talk to them, when they're mad, when they're heightened, that's not when they're going to be able to process through all of that. So in the moment, keeping that really limited language can be helpful. This also might look like using a lot of visual cues like sit down, stop, and so that way they can see the visuals instead of having to process what you're saying. Today, the consequence strategies that we're going to look at on our matrix, which is a very similar matrix to the antecedent one, are going to be the following. We're going to look at teaching calming strategies. If you have used conscious discipline in your buildings, this is one of the strategies that it uses. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at reflective thinking. So I was going to note, we're not going to use reflective thinking immediately following a target behavior. We're going to wait till a kiddo is in a calm state. But that's going to look at helping students guide through the choices they made and how they could choose better choices in the future. We're also going to look at rewards and reinforcement. So again, reinforcing when they've done the thing we want them to do, and reinforcing when they didn't do the thing we don't want them to do. Then we also have some strategies that are tied to attention and to escape. So as you're reading through these and doing your work here, these are some things I'm going to think about because you're going to be picking these for your student. So we want to make sure that some of our strategies are matched to function. Allison, I'm going to pick on you, sorry. Allison asked me, well, what if I really can't figure out the function? There's lots going on and I don't know. Not all of your strategies have to be matched to function. We can do some general strategies that we know are helpful for lots of behaviors if our function is still kind of a mystery, and that's totally okay. When we're picking reinforcements, we want to make sure that it's valuable to the student. So when I was a kiddo, if you gave me stickers, I would do pretty much anything for you. Like, I would work for stickers. And if they were Lisa Frank stickers, those of you who remember Lisa Frank, like, I was going to go, whatever. I would do whatever you wanted. However, my little boy, if I were to give him Lisa Frank stickers, he's not going to think that's super exciting. However, if I give him Cheetos, he will do pretty much anything. So we want to make sure for our kiddos that the thing we're rewarding them with is valuable to them. Also, if you're using a representative system, so like a token board, or maybe, hey, you got to get 20 points to get to the thing, or something like you have to get so many checks to get to it, make sure it's clear to them what they're working for. I've been in several times where I'll go sit by the kid and say, hey, what are you working for? I'm working for checks. What do your checks get you? I'm working for checks. So they don't really know, so then it loses its power. So making sure that's really clear. You know, not only do our SPED kids sometimes struggle with this, think about your ESL learners. Think about your kiddos that aren't good readers. If you just write what it is and they can't read it, that might not be helpful for them. Maybe you need to have a picture of what they're working for. And then the last thing when we're thinking about this, like I said before, we want to have a 2-tiered reinforcement plan. We want to have a plan for reinforcing when that target behavior goes down. They stop yelling and cursing. And then we want to have a reinforcement plan for when that replacement behavior goes up. They raise their hand and ask for help. So it's going to have 2 sides. We have to reinforce. That is going to be the backbone of your plan, is reinforcing the behaviors that we want to see. So we're going to be doing a jigsaw, but this time we're going to do a little bit differently. Instead of doing it at your table, we're going to do it in the whole room, because I think y'all have been sitting for too long and you need to get up and move a little bit. So I'll show you what team you're on. Each team is going to have a category. You'll have 10 minutes again to look through your things in your category. Then again, we're going to set and you're going to have 2 minutes to share. So here's what you're going to do. If you're in team 1, you're going to hold up 1 finger. If you're in team 2, you're going to hold up 2 fingers. Okay? So that's going to tell other people what team you're on. And then I'm going to give you 2 minutes and you got to go find somebody in a different team. Okay? And then we're going to give you 2 more minutes and you got to find someone in another different team. And so that you found someone from each of the 5 teams. Okay? Okay, awesome. So, okay, here are your teams. And if you see, there's the 5 things that we're looking at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you fit, if you're a kindergarten teacher, you're going to be looking at teaching calming strategies. If you're a 1st grade teacher, you're going to be looking at reflective thinking strategies. If you're a 2nd grade teacher, you're going to look at reinforcement and rewards. If you're a 3rd grade, you're going to look at tension-based. If you're a 4th or 5th, you're going to look at escape-based. For all our specialty teachers, so specialty, SPED, admin, whatever team you sat with today, that's going to be the team that you're going to work with. So that'll be the team you work with and you can kind of piggyback off of. So does everybody know who they're going to, what category they're going to be doing? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to put 10 minutes up, and then when you switch with your partners, you're going to see this slide, and these are the things you're going to share out with them. What did you like? What do you think would work? What do you think would be really easy to do, and what do you think would be really hard to do? So again, you're going to have 10 minutes to learn, and then you're going to have 2 minutes to share each round.
Antecedent.
Right there.
Does it ever hold up this picture?
I think it gives you get the one?
Oh, yeah.
The child a variety of options to choose from. Or just start at the bottom.
Oh, I started with all this one, you can give them the cards and then you can choose which one that they want to share with you.
So it's to cause.
Yeah, and then you could also use it to take a total up and show you. Yeah, there this way. That'd really be third, fourth, and fifth.
Give them some stories. They may come together, so I guess whatever they.
And then they have those pictures.
I think you just kind of set it, yeah, you set it up together, so you decide when the kid, you decide when
This is actually 315.
Okay, it gives you a sense of meditation, talking, stretching, counting.
Yeah, great cards also include things like using a calm down object, stress ball, sparkle ball, favorite tool.
Yeah, and it's when you go farther down to the bottom, it has examples.
Then you could just put that up in break.
It's great.
And just take it to the yes, but it has different ones. So there's a better one. But then it says make sure you set up some limitations so they're not wanting a break card at a time. You only get so many.
Well,
yeah, actually. What did you do instead?
What is the like?
Are y'all getting anything emotional to it? It's just to have a card.
She always
They're all the same.
I think that was the other thing at the bottom. Yeah, you can go to the water fountain. Yeah.
Yeah, all of them have choice of how they actually
I think I'd rather do that.
But I said the second
No, I was supposed to take it in October. And I really thought I would like it. She's very unofficial. Like the orders of work. Everybody's running to do this. I think time is sorry. We had sponsors but it was 2 days of time. But giving me the 6-day class. 2 days of time. And see the time range. This other kid that takes out some kids need it. So you just got to know your kids.
I can just and then I have started.
Yes. And this weather doesn't help. This weather makes me extremely bad. They would probably watch me yawn 100 times. I'm like, I'm getting yeah, this is the one that's at a timer could be used. The student work to 10 o'clock and then have a break. The one it's actually likely for a recess because they said there's a it's fine. It's your class. I can't like the break. So they're so busy. They were mad. Good idea. Good. But I feel like they have stuff to do. You know, they build blocks. You play with the magnets.
So they were still functioning and still having a teacher and still listening, but they could go somewhere else to have her cool down or time to release before they come back.
We were looking at that. I think some of my older kids like to pass on. Is that what you guys are coming on?
Yeah, still trying to work out.
We all love purple.
They are building already. They're building like little houses that they put up around town. That's occasionally. That would be fun for them for sure. Well, some of them because some of them don't like to draw. Was this during recess?
I made the menus. It's not that it's bad, actually. It's a Grace C. person at Pulsar made one with Minecraft. That's cute. But I need something like like princesses maybe I love really mad. Yeah, maybe I could do on an else. Yeah, that might be. Okay, everybody.
We're going to do the same thing we did before, but we're going to rotate your groups. You'll have 2 minutes, and you're going to find 4 other people. So it'll be 8 total minutes that will work. So I want everybody to go to stand up and go ahead and hold up the number of whatever the category is. That way people will be able to find you. And in the 2 minutes, you got to find your other person and share. So on your mark, get set, go.
So what category did y'all look at?
We just took the two different vertical columns, right?
No. Oh yeah, y'all aren't gonna get up. Okay. Y'all did the same thing. Okay. They can't see you, so it'll be okay, right? That'll work. We're doing good.
There's a tournament. One and two.
Heather.
I know y'all were really nice and organized, but not everybody was. They didn't follow the initial directions. So. Specialty teachers. Sped teachers are just as bad. Oh, I can't. I'll see you. So that was our first switch.
We're not actually. teach you how many times, determine the number of phrases per day you want to give that child. You keep that many pennies in your pocket, and then if they miss any case, you take it and put it in their pocket. I'm like, they can't see it. So yeah.
But I was
not a good idea. They need to measure and there's no unique Oh no, you're good. You're good. They also said where you get to the habits just by
talk to.
And then the last one, I actually like that one. And there's random cards that you can have. So it could be like, are you following directions? Thanks for taking your time. What's the effort? It's your last one. So instead of interrupting the class and you're teaching, you can just hand them the card. And they know exactly what your favorite is. Just read it and understand what you're trying to say. Instead of like stuff that you just give them the card. It's like a writing something.
Okay, when the timer goes off, let's make our way back to our seats. Let's go ahead and head back to our seats, please. Return to your tables.
I can't hear that on accident.
You can't hear me?
No, but it's not as loud as it is. I cannot hear you.
Okay, so we shared some information. Let's go back to our seats now. We're going to complete the dessert portion of our behavior menu. Okay, go ahead and complete this. So we have motivators, and then we have our consequence strategies. That's what we just shared. So your assignment now, we're going to complete these sections. Let's go ahead and try to list 5 motivating things or items, social reinforcers for our student, and 3 consequence strategies that we really liked that we found from our consequence matrix. We're going to give you 3 minutes. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're running a little short on time. Let's complete that last section. And they're off.
So that would not be a good strategy.
So you could just read it. You're filling in your last part.
Yeah. So So as you're filling in the dessert portion of your behavior menu, go ahead and fill in those motivators. Try to get 5 motivators, 3 consequence strategies. You do not have to hit submit at the end of this assignment. It should save a copy for you. It's not something that we're needing to look over or turn it in. You don't have to do that. But you should be able to keep a copy of this to take back to your classrooms. Just kind of to reiterate while we're working, so today we talked about Tier 2 behaviors. I just want to say that all behaviors are important across any tier level, but we focused on Tier 2 today, okay? So we put behaviors into tiers really for us to know what kind of resources, what kind of interventions are needed. Tier 1 behaviors are still important, and some of these strategies can still be used at that level, but if we're putting in this time, this amount of time and amount of work, we're probably more into that Tier 2 level, okay? So next steps.
Do you want me to just do the exit thing, or do you want to do it?
I need to do the exit.
I'll let you.
Okay. I'll just stand by you.
Okay. Just do it real.
If I can find
Okay guys, we really appreciate all of your time and hard work that you've put in today. Hopefully by right now you have completed a plan to address some pretty significant behaviors in your classroom. Now we've looked at a lot of strategies, both antecedent and consequence. This is not by any means exhaustive list. These also aren't Tier 2 exclusive strategies. You may have Tier 1 behaviors that these strategies can help address. These might be something that you use for all your kids. So just keeping in mind that you can be real flexible with these. Next steps for your buildings. So buildings, as you look up developing your next steps for addressing behaviors, one of the suggestions is to have building level behavior teams. So just like y'all have, a lot of schools have building level RTI teams to address student needs at those Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels for RTI, having a team of people who you can say, hey, these are your go-to people when you're struggling with behavior is really helpful. Also, having that time to collaborate and talk about those really hard kids can be helpful. Also, starting to establish for your building what your plan is for RTI. So at Tier 1, this is what we're doing. If you feel like you're at Tier 2, here's what we're going to do. If you feel like you're at Tier 3, here's what we're going to do. So having those concrete plans in place to help address these behavior deficits, just like we have plans in place for addressing academic deficits. Some things that you may, as a building, may want to spend some more time on, maybe in your faculty meetings or PLCs, is looking at how we pick replacement behaviors. So that's something you might look at in your building. So, okay, here's the behavior I see. What skill am I going to teach? You also might look at teaching strategies. Okay, here's what I want to teach them, but when am I going to do that? How am I going to do it? Who's going to teach them? So those, you might look at those. Also, spending more time on motivators and reinforcement plans. What's this kid's plan for reinforcement? What motivates this kid? Because sometimes that's hard
to figure out. So those are some things as we move forward that you guys might want to be looking at in your buildings as you start developing your plans.
All right, thank you guys for coming so much. The last thing we want you to do is to go on Google Classroom and find the assignment that says exit ticket. And we want you to complete a survey. Let us know how you did. Everybody out there on the live stream, please do that. Once you have that or have that completed, you're free to go. And
we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for coming.
Bye.